We are live. I'm going to wait for just a minute or so to have more attendees. Okay, I think the attendee count is going up. We've had people waiting for quite a while. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another webinar with Be Waste Wise. I am Shweta Dandapani. I am a community builder at Be Waste Wise. Today, we have Zoë Lenkiewicz, Director of Global Waste Lab, who is moderating today's webinar. The topic is extended producer responsibility in informal economies. Who gets the money? Zoë has put together a great panel. We have Melanie Sampson, Associate Professor of Sociology at the University of Johannesburg. We have Sergio Bon, Circular Economy Program Director at La Ciudad Posible. I hope I said that correctly. And Shobha Raghavan, CEO of Sahas Zero Waste. Thanks for the excellent response from all of you. We've had a pretty large number of registrations and several questions from the registrants. The questions has been passed on to the panel. It was incorporated as part of the initial discussion. And any questions you have over and above, please use the Q&A section. If you have any comments, please drop them into chat. And we will share how to get in touch with all the panelists towards the end of the webinar, and you can hit them up later. So over to you, Zoë.
Thank you very much, Sweta, and thank you everybody for joining. Really excited that we had almost 250 people register for this webinar. So yeah, it's obviously a very hot topic that we are touching on. So as Sweta said, my name is Zoë Lenkiewicz. I'm the Director of Global Waste Lab. I work in lots of countries across the Global South where waste management systems are developing, let's say. I help grassroots organisations and national governments and everyone in between. To try to get systems developed that are fair and just and that bring an end to open dumping and open burning. So moving on to today's webinar, I'm going to share a few slides just to kick us off. I hope that you can see this okay. I'll go into slideshow mode. There we go. Okay, so extended producer responsibility in informal economies. Who gets the money? And we've only got an hour to discuss this, so I will move along rather quickly, but I wanted to give a brief introduction to extended producer responsibility. So the idea of this economic or fiscal model is that manufacturers are responsible for the environmental impact of their products and packaging throughout their entire life cycle. So the way that extended producer responsibility systems work generally is you have a producer responsibility organization, which you can see in the middle here, that could be run by government or by a third party. Producers on the left there, producers, importers and brand owners, they pay a fee to the producer responsibility organization to cover the collection and sorting and disposal of their products and packaging at the end of their life. The producer responsibility organization is then responsible for allocating those funds to the bodies, the companies or the individuals or organizations who are collecting the waste and doing that sorting. Okay, so and then finally, you know, the idea is that recyclable materials come back down here to the recyclers and circulate back to the producers to be reused in new products and packaging. Now, some universal challenges with EPR have been found to be that, first of all, different countries have different rules. Different approaches to data collection mean that it's very difficult to track and compare systems. It can be expensive for small businesses operating in multiple countries because they have to comply with all of these different systems. When you have cross-border sales, does the money that's been collected follow the product? So when it does reach its end of life, is it supporting the collection and sorting of the material wherever it is arising as a waste? Regulatory oversight and enforcement is costly and also quite complicated. It relies a lot on good governance, and that's something that I think we'll touch on in this discussion. And finally, look, extended producer responsibility has been found to be good at raising money for waste management, but it hasn't been very effective at encouraging producers to reduce the amount of waste that ends up, being generated within society as a consequence of their products and packaging being put onto the market. However, all of that is all well and good, but in informal economies, we have this specific challenge, which is what we're here to discuss today, which is that collection and sorting involves tens of thousands of people. Okay, so returning to this diagram here, you'll see I've added a pink box over the waste collection and sorting activities here. Now, in Europe, where EPR was first developed, these roles might be provided by, say, 10 councils or a small number of waste management companies, whereas in informal economies, you might have tens of thousands of unregistered self-employed individuals. Now, these individuals are often vulnerable and marginalized in society. They may not be registered, not only on the EPR system, but generally with government. So how can we make sure that any money that's collected by the producer responsibility organisations actually reaches the people who are doing the work? That's the question for today. I'm delighted to introduce our esteemed panel, who are all very, very experienced and knowledgeable in this area. Shobha Raghavan, who is the Chief Executive of Sahas Zero Waste in India. Melanie Sampson, who is the Associate Professor of Sociology at the University of Johannesburg, who was also the author of the Waste Picker Integration Guidelines, which are a wonderful resource. And finally, Sergio Bon, who is the Circular Economy Program Director at La Ciudad Posible. And I know that all of these speakers have a lot to share with us today, so I'm not going to take any more time at this stage, and I'm going to flick onto these questions briefly, just as a little starting point for our discussion. So I'm going to ask each of our speakers in turn to describe how EPR has been implemented in their country, and then to explore, are frontline workers receiving fair benefits from the money that's raised? Is the system transparent and achieving its aims? Is the money that's being raised actually delivering positive change? If not, why not? What can other countries learn? How can we develop EPR systems in the Global South that recognise and reward the tens of thousands of people who are working hard every day, often with no social protections or PPE, to make sure that those materials are returned to the value chain? And just to get this in perspective, this is, about 40% of the materials that are returned to value chains around the world are believed to come from these informal collectors and sorters. So finally, I'm going to be asking the speakers, what do they think are the factors for success? So that's it from me. I promised you a short introduction, and I'm going to invite Shobha, first of all, to share with us your experiences at Sahas Zero Waste in India. Thanks, Shobha. Over to you.
Thank you, Zoe. Thank you, Shweta. And good evening to all of you from India. And happy to be part of this panel and discuss some candid facts about EPR in India. I would say that the EPR policy in India is for plastics and even e-waste is been really progressive for the last 7 to 8 years and is tending towards circular economy. But I think only the environmental aspects of EPR have been considered. The material aspects of EPR has been considered. The economics aspect is to some extent being discussed and trying to be regulated, that what's going to be the cost of EPR. However, the social aspects of EPR are not at all considered in this implementation. So I would like to just take a step back to just talk about this informal workers, or informal economies, and what does it mean? It refers to those workers who don't have any legal employment, no kind of a contract, no official working space, no kind of license, no access to healthcare, no entitlements for social security, and do not comply with any health and safety or environmental standards. And in this just transition that we're talking about, how can we be as fair and as inclusive as possible to everyone who's connected on this value chain, creating the decent work opportunities and leaving no one behind, right? And how do we ensure their human dignity and their historic contribution to this very critical part of recycling, EPR, and the circular economy? So any good EPR system would actually need to be building a very solid, long-term organizational structure with some reliable funding and This is when you're going to see benefits to workers and all the other smaller businesses that are working in line with this, building this ecosystem. And definitely we can then see an effective EPR that has a nation, countrywide collection of the packaging, uh, building the right infrastructure across the value chain for collection, for sorting, so that recycling is possible, to ensure recyclability of the waste also, and ensuring high quality granules are coming in order to enable this economy, to ensure that the non-recyclable is also landing up in the right disposal mechanism, and moving away from in the landfill. Data traceability to document and monitor this whole change, fulfilling all the obligations of different stakeholders required for this compliance. Industry participating in training and advising this entire ecosystem. What is the kind of packaging they are putting, and how do we need to take it for recycling? And also ensuring all the safety standards and compliance required for the workers, minimum wages, living wages as required are enabled. And most critically is how to monitor this financial flows and make it transparent. And this is a very critical topic that you brought out today, is we are not able to trace the money flow from the producer to the different stakeholders on the value chain. So one key, today in India, EPR is just talking about material recyclability and the credits being transferred to the producers, and has moved away from actual operations on the ground, saying that the informal sector who's involved in actual door-to-door collection and sorting, and ensuring it's going for the right channelization, are they being incentivized correctly? No, they are not. They are not being incentivized. Neither is the producer having an eye for that kind of an obligation. So this is going. This is the biggest pain point in India, and this is something that we need to really look at. So what do we need to do now? There should be an approach to formalization, and what we need to understand also is there's a fine line between where does informal end and where does formal start, right? So how do we draw that fine line, first of all? Secondly, the workers, the informal workers, are in a state of vulnerability, because they are dependent on segregation at source. Because if that segregation at source is not good, then there's a contamination of waste, and therefore the quality, the monetization towards that waste is going to vary. And then whether the ecosystem and the market is available for selling that waste, and therefore your incomes are vulnerable on a day-to-day basis over what you're going to actually earn, and are you able to meet your 3 meals, right? So at this level, how do we bring that state of formalization? So there should be this kind of a legal framework or recognition for waste pickers, either through a cooperative or through some PRO model, which is registering all these waste workers and giving them that identity, where they are able to get social status that they are a waste picker and they are recognized, and they have to be part of a registered system. And once they're part of a registered system, then how do we ensure that they get monthly payouts, minimum monthly payouts, which are fixed? Over and above, they can have a variable payout incentivized based on the amount of sorting they do or quality of waste they bring, and the productivity that they can bring. They have to have access to protective gear, because health and safety is very, very critical. How can they have access to ergonomic infrastructure for collection? Because you see that in very difficult conditions, they have push carts and they have to push over slopes, and in hot heat and rain and such conditions, how can they collect effectively and ergonomically so it doesn't affect their health? Very critical, a lot of child labor is being used, and how do we give access to daycare centers for their children? How do we ensure that they get access to scholarships so their children go to school? How do we ensure they have healthcare schemes to ensure they have good checkups during their year? And training for skilling, right? Because that's again, the more you get skilled, the more you collect and sort better, and more you can get value. And also access to infrastructure so that they don't work in no man's land. They have sort, and they can store in a safe place. So this is a few approaches that we can have towards formalization. Now, another problem that has happened here is that they have knocked out the PRO structure. They tried to copy the West and bring in the PRO structure. It was good. The idea was to how can this PRO, which is a waste management organization, which is a very formal registered organization who understands that entire flowchart that you showed, right? And gets the money from the producer, but then distributes it to the different collection points and the sorting points, and then to the recycler, and becomes this independent body which is monitoring the money and the waste flow and the health and safety and other aspects. So that PRO, they had dropped that as a legal entity, and they have said that any waste management organization can then take forward these activities, but it has not got in the right sense to the producer, and therefore that whole thing has fallen apart. But this has to come back, whether you call it PRO or waste management agency, whatever you want. The PRO, this agency needs to get that responsibility where he connects the waste pickers, the waste picker organizations, and all the informal guys in a registered format, and he commits saying that because I collected your waste from south of India, I have been able to give employment on incentivization, or your monies have gone to 100 people. He should bring in data and show it to the producer. So the producer also then can take credit of that they have been able to bring so many people into the supply chain. And PRO should also show agreements with these informal pickers and organizations that they have been able to pay them X amount of fixed pay and variable pay. Similarly, there's a commitment that has to come from producer also, where they have to disclose not only environmental, but also they have to have social performance indicators, which is very, very critical in evolution of this EPR system, which is absolutely lacking at this point, because what is being measured is how much of your waste has been recycled, plastic or e-waste has been recycled. And that is a big miss. And they should also be, producers should also give the data traceability of their performance indicators, saying that their monies have gone to so many informal players through the PRO. Each of them have been dispersed so much money per month and so many tons of waste, plus how many jobs have been created. And once they start showing, they're mandated to show it, then the system becomes more effective. I will stop here and happy to take any questions.
Wow, thank you, Shopha. That was an amazing sort of rundown, of a very impressive rundown of actually where the responsibilities need to lie. In fact, to consider that producer responsibility organizations do have to, take responsibility for the social side, as well as the tonnage of material that's collected and returned to the market. So thank you for that. And also importantly, what you flagged at the end about the producers also needing to take responsibility for those social impacts. And report on those as much as they report again on the material and environmental records. Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much. Right, so I'm going to hand over to Melanie next. Hi, Melanie. Please, could you share some of your experiences and insights on this topic as well? And what we'll do is we'll go to all three speakers, and then we'll have a wider discussion and bring in questions from the chat as well. So thanks, Melanie. Over to you.
Great. Thanks so much. And thanks so much for organizing this discussion on this crucially important topic. So I am based in South Africa. And in South Africa, we actually have really fantastic EPR regulations in terms of inclusion of reclaimers or so-called waste pickers. But unfortunately, that policy win is being undermined by gross non-compliant, lack of enforcement by government, and finally, and most distressing and depressingly, recent moves by government to amend the regulations to weaken the integration of and support for reclaimers. So if I can just take a step back and explain that, as Zoe mentioned, in South Africa, national government in 2020 adopted the waste picker integration guideline for South Africa. It was developed through a 3-year participatory evidence-based policy-making process that included all of the key stakeholders in the sector. I was very privileged to facilitate that process. And the guideline is really quite remarkable, because what it says is that it recognizes the crucial role of reclaimers or waste pickers in South Africa.
We've lost your sound, Melanie.
Oh goodness.
Oh, you're back.
Can you hear me now? Unfortunately, I'm having internet problems today, and so I'm
That's
hotspotting
okay.
from my phone. So just
We've
let
got
me
you
know.
again. That's
Great.
great.
Okay. So what I was saying is that our national guideline recognizes that the entire recycling industry is based, or has for many decades been based on the gross exploitation of unpaid labor by reclaimers. And in our guideline, we have 10 key principles for waste picker integration, one of which is that they must be paid for the services that they provide. And our definition of waste picker integration in South Africa is that waste picker integration isn't about taking individual reclaimers or waste pickers and including them in a system created by so-called experts, non-reclaimers, but waste picker integration is the creation of a formally planned recycling system that builds on and strengthens the system already created by reclaimers. So that was adopted in 2020. And in 2021, our EPR regulations, which had only come out the year before, were amended to say that producer responsibility organizations must support waste picker integration and crucially must pay reclaimers who are registered on the national registration system a service fee. So it also says that the level of the amount of that service fee must be reviewed every year by agreement was reached between the PRO Alliance, which is a group of some of the leading PROs in the country, and the two main reclaimer organizations. There was an agreement that was reached that the payment would be per weight, so that when a reclaimer would go to sell their materials, they would get, the fee that they normally receive when they sell materials, but they would get an additional fee, which would be the service fee, which would be based on per kilogram sold. So this was all very exciting and very participatory and collaborative. And unfortunately, payments were supposed to start in November 2022. To date, only a handful, I think it's only several hundred reclaimers who are registered on the national registration system have been paid. There has been gross non-compliance by the PROs. There was a fantastic investigative journalism expose on one of our leading TV shows. I'll put a link to that in the chat for people who are interested in seeing it. So the very unfortunate thing is government passed these fantastic regulations, but has not been, the monitoring systems were very weak. It's emerged that it seems they weren't even really requiring the PROs to clearly report on how many people who were on the system, the national registration system, were paid. In addition, as I mentioned, what we now see is just a few weeks ago, government gazetted proposed revisions to the regulations that would eliminate the need for the national registration system. And these proposed revisions say PROs will pay waste pickers who register with them. Now, this is an absolutely absurd proposal for a number of reasons. First of all, national governments spent money to develop in a participatory way a national registration system that everyone was involved in and that has numerous verification aspects, which the two main waste picker organizations support, and which now, ironically, since the investigative journalism expose, the PRO Alliance is also saying, yes, this is the registration system, we need to go ahead and implement it. Nevertheless, government has now issued these revisions. So it's crucially important, I think, in every country to have a national registration system for waste pickers. And we can discuss all of the reasons why, but it's a recognition of the occupation. It gives us accurate data on how many people are actually doing this work. And it also, our system provides processes for verification that this person is actually a reclaimer. It's not someone else who is, pretending to be a reclaimer. That's number one. Number two, if you get rid of this system and say, well, the PROs pay anyone who registers with them, where are the checks and balances, right? So once again, it's letting PROs govern themselves. But if a reclaimer sells, PET, polyprop, cardboard, paper, glass, they're going to have to go and register with more than 5 PROs because in South Africa we have competing PROs for so I think what's really sad and unfortunate is we had this remarkable process, and a participatory evidence-based policy process, which is what we need to develop our guidelines. The regulations are very strong, but now they're being undermined. So just as a last few words in terms of what needs to be done. Well, in fact, today, the African Reclaimers Organization, a mass-based democratic movement of waste pickers, reclaimers in South Africa, marched to the Central Police Station in Johannesburg to lay charges against most of the PROs, because our EPR regulations have a provision that says you can lay criminal charges for non-compliance. And if the PROs are found to be non-compliant, they can face financial charges, fines, imprisonment, I guess that's for the directors, and deregistration. And national governments and the national government's what do you call them, the special unit that looks into environmental crimes came and accepted the memorandum. So this is a very interesting space that we're in, but it's tremendously unfortunate that reclaimers have to be the ones to force government to enforce its own regulations. So just in terms of what we need to keep the regulations that we have, we need to strengthen them. But the crucial thing is that EPR cannot be governed by PROs on their own, right? We need to have co-governance of EPR. We need to have clear dispute resolution mechanisms. And particularly when it comes to waste picker integration, we need to have a clarity that PROs cannot be deciding on their own what they need to do. And governments need to step up their monitoring, enforcement, and compliance. And monitoring and enforcement needs to be participatory as well, because what we discovered as national government was not making the PROs report on the specific aspects of the regulations that were necessary to advance reclaimers' rights. So we need a much more participatory approach. We need an end to industry governing itself, because they are not going to make the changes that are required, and they're going to continue to exploit reclaimers. Thank you.
Wow, Melanie, thank you so much for that. That's a great introductory speech about what's happening in South Africa. So thank you for sharing that. It is really disappointing to see how the best of intentions can fall apart, and I think it's particularly concerning when it's the waste reclaimers themselves that are having to try to hold government and PROs to account. Because it's not like they don't have enough going on and enough struggles in their day-to-day lives, as well as doing their work, and then trying to get their rights upheld by government is another thing altogether. So yeah, one to watch there. And thank you again, Melanie, for joining us. Sergio, I'm going to hand over to you now to hear the experience from Latin America, from Argentina, where you're working, and I believe there's some other countries as well.
Yes, well, thank you, Zoe, and everyone for this invitation and being part of this. Yeah, first of all, a bit of contrast to what Melanie was saying in terms of we don't have EPR regulation for packaging waste, at least. The only regulation of EPR in Argentina is related to agrochemical containers, and after a slow start, it is picking up. However, the impact is very low. I'm more expert in Argentina, but I can speak of other experiences in Latin America, where Uruguay and Chile also started with good EPR regulations, but results are very hard to achieve. So companies are pouring lots of money into the PROs and no results. And that has to do with infrastructure and all the systems that have to be in place beyond a regulation. Other examples of EPR regulations and systems, I can highlight Brazil and Colombia, where there is a shared responsibility approach to packaging waste. So with regards to the informal market, there is a long history in Argentina of waste pickers getting organized after successive financial crises. I would just mention the one in 2001, where loads of people that were left out of the formal economy actually went into waste picking to make a living. The response has been mainly from the state, where they've done a great job of just avoiding the waste pickers to work in open air dumps. So we have in many parts of the country, and they have improved a lot. So providing them, the municipalities, with some facilities, or even allowing them to bring their stuff on trains and so on, and that evolved a lot. So the waste pickers in the last 24 years have progressed a lot into getting organized, and with the spirit of fight with the local governments, they obtain a lot of improvement and benefits. I would like to highlight the city of Buenos Aires of 3 million people, which is part of a larger metropolitan area, has 12 cooperatives working on the city. That's around 6,000 waste pickers that have a level of formality that's much better than 20 years ago. So they got some basic social benefits, a basic fixed income, and the municipality pays, for example, for all the infrastructure, the sorting plants, the trucks, and so on. So going along this, as you can say, I haven't mentioned the private sector being quite active in here. So basically, there have been efforts in the last 20 years also to regulations have been presented by legislators in the Congress with no success, because there is no consensus within industry or with industry and the state. So far, there is a willingness also from the producers that a regulation on EPR for waste packaging, which is the largest impact stream of material. However, there is still no agreement on it. Particularly my role, I've been working on promoting a voluntary PRO for packaging waste as a preparation for a regulation in the near future. There are individual efforts from companies that are acting as EPRs for specific material streams like PET or beverage cartons and other plastics. And that has some positive impacts in terms of, yes, the funds will get eventually to the waste pickers collectives. And for example, what we have learned is that sometimes the bottlenecks are not related to the income a waste picker will get, but incentivizing logistics. Argentina is a very large country, and the cost of logistics, transporting by trucks, very high volume material and little weight, low density is almost prohibited. So acting on incentivizing and subsidizing logistics has indirectly improved the income of the waste pickers in faraway cities. So today, the effort of the governments is mostly what has improved the lives of the waste pickers. We more or less estimate 200,000 waste pickers working in Argentina, and only a quarter of them have some level of formality. Nevertheless, we expect that every fluctuation in the financial situation of the country adds a lot more of waste pickers into the cities. So that's a big problem, because the former waste pickers, having originated in the same way, have some solidarity with them, so they share the work, and some have much better working conditions, EPP or whatever, transport, and the others are pushing carts or whatever. So we have all these discussions with the collectives, and we all tend to understand that even formalizing a system will not sort all inequality problems in a country. That's the role of a state, to generating more jobs. However, it is the role of the private sector, the producers, to make sure that through an EPR concept, they improve the quality and the life of all people involved in the value chain. So the discussion is there. There is willingness from the private sector, because international companies mainly have international targets for material offsetting. And if the system doesn't work well, then they cannot achieve the target. So they are interested, and they are actually investing individually into specific programs. So we believe now that has to progress into larger collective systems or PROs, and eventually a regulation would be more than welcome. Saying so, there is another big contradiction in the last 20 years. Argentina has invested quite a lot through international funding on new sorting plants in cities ranging from 50,000 people to 2 or 3 million people. Many of these sorting plants are working at idle level, so at 20–30% of capacity. So how come you invest a lot in, well, I would say a state-of-the-art or whatever, at least for our region, equipment, and then have them empty or with no sourcing? And that's the problem of the whole approach, holistic approach to packaging waste, for example, that needs to take into account the whole value chain from collection, et cetera, as you all know. On the other hand, we have big, richer cities investing a lot in waste treatment. So Buenos Aires have a 7-day collection. Many cities have 6-day-a-week collection. In some municipalities, it's up to 30–35% of the budget of a city is gone to waste collection instead of going to other important areas, education, health, or whatever. So we got in a large, inefficient, and not effective systems for, I mean, we understand we targeted firstly of sanitation and the urgencies, but looking at the opportunities on a recycling material stream or even organics, and that goes to the same place in a very inefficient way. So the discussion is the private sector don't want to pick up the bill, saying, I don't want to subsidize a very expensive system with 7-day collection. But the state is also saying, well, we need your involvement here because you need to pick up the bill of all the materials you put into the market. So that's where we are now, from the private sector trying to build consensus to start voluntary systems to make the system work, because we, the other fact I'd like to highlight, in Argentina, Brazil as well, there is a large industrial area for processing materials. That doesn't happen in all Latin American countries. So PET in the Caribbean and some countries need to be shipped to another country across the ocean. Argentina has capacity for plastic recycling, glass, cardboard, et cetera. We come from a very closed economy, and sadly, in the last year, the administration changed and opened up the economy quite brutally. So the prices of cardboard, plastics, et cetera, have dropped to 1/3 of its value, affecting a lot, mainly waste pickers and recycling rate. So anyway, nothing new to you, but like to highlight these similarities and differences. We know a regulation only is not enough, but if there is no regulation, there is a limit to what the systems, the voluntary systems or PROs can do. So
Great,
happy to.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sergio. No, that's wonderful. Really, really good account of how things are going in Latin America there. Thank you. I think I'm going to pick up on a few things that have come up from all of the speakers. First of all is waste picker registration. How do we get people to register? I see Margaret Ashodi, hi Margaret, has made a good point in the Q&A here that many waste pickers are unwilling to be registered because of distrust in their governments. So could there be another body that is sort of outside of government and outside the PROs that is responsible for the registration and regulation of the system? Also, this question about whether, I mean, I've always thought it's wildly unfair that waste pickers are only paid for the material value of what they collect. This is what results in a lot of, low value plastics and so on being discarded in the environment or burned, which is awful for all of us. And it's just not fair. Like, the materials aren't worth anything. Shoba, I see you've got your hand up. Would you like to come in there?
Yeah, I think the first point I'd also like to pick up is registration, right? And yes, we've out of experience, we realized that there is a trust factor, and it's a very sensitive community we are talking to, right? It should not be that we are trying to bypass them with very progressive regulations coming. So we will need some kind of intermediary people or organizations who are very local and who have worked with them on other issues. They can be a community leader, or they could be an NGO that's worked with them for the other developmental issues. And they could be that one organization which is able to communicate to them that we are only going to make their lives better, and we are going to only help them live better, have a good quality of life, help them earn better, and help them grow their future generations to a better person, right? So that is one, and we will need that local support for navigating into this system. A second is on the material part. Yes, see, waste management has to be very comprehensive. It cannot be that certain materials have a monetizable value and there's a market that is close to that vicinity, and rest of it can just be dumped or burned. So therefore, that picking up all the waste and characterizing them, bringing it to a sorting center, and bringing data around it, and looking at all the funds, the EPR funds or any other support system funds that can also help dispose of the non-recyclables or the low value material is also required, because most cases the light material, the flexibles, are never collected from the system, because you need so much of that material to actually to build that whole one truck of vehicle, and it's difficult, and the cost that is there for incurred for that is not going to give you from the revenue that you're getting, and hence therefore that connection with the producer and the ecosystem is required, that I'm going to support that material. We will be providing funds for it. We know that it is lighter material and requires more collection in order to bring it to a specific minimum quantity. And then there's a transport charge for the closest recycling. That a continuous engagement between the producer of the packaging material and, of course, the ecosystem where waste pickers are there is definitely required to help us take all material, irrespective of the value it holds in the material market.
Great, thank you. Really, really important points there. I see Melanie's got her hand up. Would you like to come in, Melanie? Thanks, Shobha.
Yes, thank you so much. So I think, the approach we've taken in South Africa is very different. Rather than saying we must rely on an NGO or some other body, we've said we need participatory collaborative processes. So I've put a link in the chat to some information on the South Africa waste picker registration system. But the way our system was designed is that in order to register a waste picker, you need two people involved, a registrar and a verifier. And a registrar can be anyone, but the verifier has to be a waste picker. And the system was co-designed with waste picker organizations. They played a crucial role in deciding what information should be requested, how do we ask those questions. And when we piloted the system in the country, we started by piloting it with the Waste Picker Association, so that they are the experts on how to do registration. So when we first started by piloting with them, then we went to some of the metros. So when we went to Cape Town, we took leaders of the waste picker organizations with us to teach the municipal officials how to do registration. And this is the kind of process that we need, because it's the only way to create the trust, to generate the trust and legitimacy amongst waste pickers. But it's also about building capacity of waste pickers through the process of their own registration, right? And the key thing we have to keep emphasizing here is this is not a technical issue. And the PROs in South Africa keep trying to find technical hacks and how can we put this into some computer system and get the databases to merge. But even if you could do that, then you lose the human aspect. And it's about engaging waste pickers as human beings and using these as opportunities to do education, to build their capacity, to strengthen their position in the recycling economy. So we have to have a much more socially transformative approach. But we've seen the difference. The city of Johannesburg tried for years to register waste pickers, and no one would register with them because nobody trusted them. As soon as they partnered with the African reclaimers organization, in just a few weeks, they registered more than 1,000 reclaimers, right? And then unfortunately, the city backed out of that agreement because they said they didn't want to register non-South Africans. And ironically, because they said they hadn't budgeted to pay the waste pickers who were doing registration to do registration work. So they expected them to lose their daily income to go and help the city do registration, right? So we just need to have a much more holistic way of thinking through these things. And that's why participatory processes are so crucial. Because if reclaimers or waste pickers are not in the room helping to design these systems, they're going to fail.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that, Melanie. I think strong message there coming through about participation in the actual process of system design, but also registration. And that's something I want to come back to Sergio, because I don't know if the situation in Argentina is very different, but from what I've read, the number of waste pickers has fluctuated significantly over time. So when the economy is low, it attracts a lot more people to waste picking. But then as the economy improves, would those people still end up on, they don't become deregistered, if you like. So you might have a lot of dormant people who are registered on a system, but are not actually active in waste picking still. So is that something that you've come across, Sergio?
Well, as you mentioned, the informality increases a lot when the times are harder, and registration, it will be an issue in general, not just for waste picking. The government have been in the success in the previous year having, I would say, quite decent welfare system of a basic universal income. The problem is you lose that if you are formalizing any job. So that's a break to any other formalization effort. So at the end of the day, we need to live with various systems coexisting, like the Waste Pickers Collective have been very good and effective in organizing themselves and register themselves and getting benefit and tangible benefits. However, that's not enough, what I'm saying. There is still a large area that will be left between the cooperatives and, let's say, the unknown. As Melanie is saying, the participation is crucial, and that has been good. We have, for the first time in the last 3 years, a member of the Congress is a waste picker, for example. Yeah, so there is voice in the national legislative bodies of waste pickers, and I think there is a lot of work to be done in making aware the population of what a waste picker does. I think they've been crucial in signaling the importance of the environmental issues to city dwellers. I think middle classes have despised in many things the role of waste pickers. We have done lots of projects to make people aware the crucial role that the waste pickers, because they were the very first to understand the danger of for the environment, because they live closer to the open pit dams and so on. So that they also, their effort involved into some legislation to allow the work, which has been an evolution. In summary, I think dynamizing a market, increasing the value of packaging waste, for example, will naturally enhance and formalize a system. Yeah, so that's how at least I see it, and we don't want to get to the ideal of formalizing everything, because that will be impossible.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. Shobha, you've got your hand up. Would you like to come in there?
Yeah, I would like to give an analogy of how we have been able to create jobs in this space. We have about 250 workers who are working with us as employees. And we're coming from a big city in India, and there are other options for these workers to take up other housekeeping jobs, gardening jobs, security jobs. However, they've stayed with us for the last 10 years, and that is because of the dignity we bring to them, the job assurance that we give to them, also continuously engaging with them that that because of their work, how they are able to bring an change in the environment. So when you give that pride and dignity to them and assurance of a job security, they stay, though there are other jobs that could pay them better, right? So that way, I think if we have this kind of a structure that is giving them a fixed pay and then a variable pay by the way you process your waste, it enables them to stay in the system and not look for other jobs, even though the GDP of the country is increasing or whatever. So something like that we may want to think. Of course, there's no one solution for these things, and you'll have to create something very creative and it's very dynamic.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Shobha. Actually, one thing that I thought it's worth mentioning, because it was a post of yours on LinkedIn that inspired this webinar topic, and you were talking about the e-waste PROs in India, because the way it's set up in India is that they work in kind of in competition with each other. So that's kind of incentivized them to reduce the price of their credits, which is the way that they operate. So they sell the credits to the producers and importers and brand owners. But in the kind of through competition, the price of these credits has reduced, which in turn has created a race to the bottom among the waste collectors and reclaimers in e-waste. They are often doing very dangerous work in their own homes. So could you just talk to that for a minute or two, please?
Yeah, see the now the contracts are being signed between the producer and the recycler directly, and all it means is, can you just recycle the material, show us the documents, and transfer the credits. Now that is very dangerous because they have moved their eyes off operations, and therefore the cost has reduced, right? And because there is no social angle to this entire piece of EPR, there is no in the portal, in the government portal where you need to submit the documents. You're only showing that material has moved from A to B to C and got recycled and sold in the downstream market. But there are no data indicators that how many people have been used, whether you're paid minimum wages, whether they have been incentivized, whether child labor is used. Nothing, no kind of a social indicator is there in this. So it's going to be an absolutely new system in India if the social indicator is going to be brought into EPR. But I think that is critical. And reason the prices have dropped is because obviously there are players who can compromise on these things and still recycle the materials. And therefore, we are trying to compete just on a material price, keeping the social price at stake.
Great, thank you. So lots of important issues. Guys, we're 8 minutes from finishing already. I knew the time was going to fly. So I just want to recap some of the key issues that have come out here. We've been talking about the responsibilities of the producer responsibility organisations. Should they be responsible for delivering training and making sure that waste reclaimers or waste pickers receive a service fee as well as, or instead of the value of the materials that they collect? Who's monitoring the financial flows? How are we encouraging householders or waste producers to separate their waste at source, which enables waste pickers to do their work a lot more easily, a lot more safely as well, and get a better outcome in terms of the money that you can recover for those materials? We talked a lot about the social impacts. So how many EPR systems do we know that have really centered the people who are delivering the work, and their needs? How many how many times have their needs been explored, or when are these people brought to the table? How many EPR systems are being developed in a participatory way, as so eloquently described by Melanie as well? Bringing everyone to the table, but it's not just a case of bringing people to the table, because if you're not used to being at that table, then you're less likely to be able to represent yourself and your the people that you're there to speak for. So then there's work that needs to be done in the background as well to make sure that people who are representing waste pickers and waste reclaimers in these fora, that they have the skills and the confidence to say what needs to be said, Because often, if you're used to being around a boardroom, then it's easy. But if you're not, then it can be a very alienating and exclusory experience. So we've also talked about what do we need from government? Okay, so we need government to create this participatory fora. We need a national registration system so that waste pickers don't have to register with each individual PRO that may be collecting plastic, or this one's doing paper, or this one's doing e-waste, or whatever. We need better monitoring, compliance and dispute resolution. And government really needs to help out with the infrastructure and logistics. So, waste pickers often struggle from not having transport. Transport can be really expensive, and it can make or break a kind of a business model, even as a micro entrepreneur. So how can government help there? And back on Sergio's point there, that we see infrastructure that's broken down all over the place. Oh, we're bringing state of the art, whatever, to this place, and before you know it, 3 of the 4 conveyor belts are broken down. They can't get the spare parts because they can't get through customs, and all of these issues that then put people out of work. So where they have been formalized and brought into, all these jobs have been created, but if those jobs are not sustained, then those waste pickers are back out on the street collecting whatever they can, with no protections and no formalized contracts. So I think it is a very complex issue. We've got a few minutes left, so I'm going to, I hope Melanie's still here as well. Shobha, being as you've got the microphone at the moment, could you give us in 1 minute, what would you recommend if a country is looking at EPR, which a lot of them are now? What would be your kind of top tips for making sure that the system is inclusive and that the money reaches the right people?
Yes, I think for India, it is amending the policy to bring in the social indicators, because that has to happen at a policy level. And in order to put the social indicators, we need to have a voice of the waste picker organizations, representatives, and the PROs, and others who know what the indicators should be. So that is a critical change that has to happen. Second is the entire thing about how do we put in data across the supply chain so that these indicators are going to, the data coming against these indicators are going to be true and validated, and it's just not some data that you're just putting for the namesake. So it has to be, this should be digitized money flow, and when we're saying that the pickers have to be registered under a PRO or under any organization, whatever format you want, and it should be like this person got so much this month and picked so much of waste from this area and this type of waste. So to that extent, if data is actually is captured at a very decentralized level, then I think this whole system can build and evolve over and above it. I think these are 2 things I would look like a call to action.
Really good advice. Thank you so much. Sergio, I'm going to go to you next, and then we'll end with Melanie. Thank you. Thanks, Shobha.
Well, I think as we hear from different panelists, regulation on its own is not enough. We need leadership, and I would say from the producers mainly, in cooperation and participation with the authorities and the waste pickers. There is not just one solution that one single party can sort this out, but we need more leadership from the producers into bringing all their expertise and management skills and project management to this problem. Yeah.
Super. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. And Melanie, over to you then.
Thank you so much. I just want to thank everyone for an absolutely fantastic conversation. And Zoe, your summary was quite remarkable. So I think there's a lot that we can extract from this discussion. Just in closing, 2 points. I've shared a link to a website. It's easy. It's wastepickerintegration.org, where you can find information on many of the different aspects of the South African system. And all of this is really about flipping the way we think and shifting power relations. And so I was really struck, Zoe, I absolutely agree with you. It's not just about giving people a seat at the table. It's about, ensuring that people have the resources and the capacity and support to be in those rooms. At the same time, the African Reclaimers Organization has been insisting that representatives of the corporates and the PROs come and spend a day working on the streets with reclaimers and holding meetings in spaces where reclaimers are comfortable. And I think this is crucially important because many of the people in PROs, in government, consultants who are developing policy proposals and overseeing it actually have very little understanding of how the work is done on the ground. And so let's place that work at the center of all of our processes, and it can be really transformative. So let's think even where are we holding our meetings and who is facilitating those meetings and who is designing the agendas. But thanks again for a great conversation.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Melanie. All the speakers have been absolutely fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for your brilliant participation in the chat and the Q&A as well. I see Sweta has kindly shared our LinkedIn addresses. So please do get in touch with any of us and we will be happy to chat. So just very last minute roundup then, what do we need to make sure that the waste pickers, the people doing this work, are actually getting the benefits from EPR systems? We need social indicators. We need to make sure that we're measuring the right things, because if we're not looking at this, we've got no idea. And when you're not looking at it, you know that it's the vulnerable people that are going to be missing out. Yeah, we need better participation and leadership, getting everybody around the table, but doing it in such a way that shifts that power balance to make sure that the people, again, who are doing the work have a fair say. And just to pick up on something that Melanie said there, walk a day in my shoes. I think that everybody that's involved in creating, rules or systems that affect so many people's lives should be required to go and spend at least a day, go out with the waste pickers, do the work with them, see for yourself what their challenges are. Because only then you're going to be really able to create sympathetic systems that really help to bring everybody on board and deliver a just transition to a circular economy. So that's it from me. Once again, thank you all very much for joining. Huge thanks to the speakers, Shoba, Melanie and Sergio. You've all been wonderful. And, I do hope that everybody who's joined will link in with you and follow your work, because it's really important and you're really at the front of all of this. So thank you very much. And thank you, Sweta, for hosting.
Thank you, Zoe. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Zoe.
A little bit of housekeeping update for the audience, because I've had questions about if the recording will be available. Yes, please go to wastewise.be. The recording will be available in 2 weeks. We also send out newsletters updating you. Follow us on LinkedIn. Sign up for our newsletter. You'll get all the updates. And I forgot to mention this. If you want to see other webinars Zoe has moderated or talked in, please go to the webinar section of our website and you'll be able to find them there. Bye-bye. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.